In this video, we will hear encounters with Skinwalkers, creatures that can shapeshift, lurking in the shadows, revealing the terrifying reality of crossing paths with something that isn't what it seems.
The Imitator.
I will never forget that night on the road, when I had to run from that thing that was following me using my friend's form. It was early morning, and I was driving north, heading to a small town where my family lived. The trip was long, and the deserted, dark highway surrounded me with an eerie silence. After driving for several hours, my eyes began to close. I needed a break, so I decided to stop at an abandoned gas station on the side of the road. The place was old and run down, like it had been beaten by time and neglect. I got out of the car, and the cold early morning wind hit my face. I walked around, trying to wake myself up, when suddenly I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, thinking maybe someone else was seeking refuge in the middle of the night, but no one was there. I went back to the car, and before getting in, I saw him. Standing next to a rusted post was my friend Andrew, or at least someone identical to him. It was impossible for him to be there. Andrew lived in another state, and I hadn't told him anything about my trip. But what unsettled me the most was the way he was looking at me. A blank, expressionless stare, as if he was a distorted reflection of the person I knew. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, still, watching me. I called out his name, but he didn't respond. Instead, he started walking toward me, with slow, awkward steps, as if he was learning how to walk for the first time. For a moment, I thought something bad had happened to him, that he needed help, but there was something in his face that told me that thing wasn't Andrew. I got into the car, but before I could drive away, I saw him approach until he was right in front of me. His face, though it looked like Andrew's, was tense and distorted by a strange smile. A smile that seemed stretched, as if his skin had dried up and was pulling at his features. He looked into my eyes and his smile grew wider, so much so that it seemed like his mouth would split in two. I hit the gas and got out of there as fast as I could, but after only a few meters, I heard banging on the roof of the car, like someone or something was scratching at it. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. I had the feeling that if I did, I would see that thing running after me, with that twisted smile on Andrew's face. I kept driving for several minutes until the banging stopped. Silence took over the road again, and for a moment, I thought maybe I had imagined it, that the exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But then, something in the rearview mirror caught my attention. I looked, and there he was, sitting in the back seat. He was hunched over, his face barely illuminated by the faint light from the road. But what I saw froze me. It wasn't Andrew, not entirely. His skin looked torn, like a poorly fitted mask, and his eyes were two dark voids. A cold chill ran down my spine as I saw how that thing stared at me. Then, his lips began to move, trying to form words. And although his voice sounded like Andrew's, there was something distorted about it, like two voices struggling to speak at once, fighting to come out of that mouth. "Why? Are you leaving?" he whispered with difficulty, as if he were testing how to use his vocal cords. I stopped suddenly, and when I turned my head to the back, he was gone. But the back seat was destroyed, filled with deep marks, like something had frantically clawed at it. I stumbled out of the car and ran down the road. I looked around, hoping to find any sign of help, but all that surrounded me was endless asphalt and darkness. Gasping for air, I looked back at the car one last time, and there he was, that figure that looked like Andrew, but now moving in a twisted way, almost as if his body didn't know how to maintain a human form. "We'll see each other soon," he whispered. And then, as if the darkness of the night swallowed him, he simply vanished. I ran without stopping until my legs couldn't go any further, until the dawn finally lit up the road. The image of that crooked smile haunts me every time I go to sleep and close my eyes. along with the feeling of being watched at all times.
Footsteps in the night.
I saw something moving between the trees. At first I thought it was a deer, but its body was too human. I could see it stumbling toward me. When I was little, we used to spend summers in a cabin isolated in the middle of the forest. It was a beautiful place, with a nearby lake and a path surrounded by trees. Everything in that cabin was perfect, until that night. I was 8 years old, and although I usually slept soundly, something woke me up in the middle of the night. I stayed silent for a moment, trying to understand what had startled me, when I heard something outside the window. It was a strange sound, like slow footsteps on the dry leaves of the forest. Maybe it's some animal, I thought, but Rocky, my dog, who always slept at the foot of my bed, jumped up and with a low growl stared at the door. I tried to calm him down, but his ears were stiff and his eyes wouldn't leave the door. I looked out the window, toward the forest. The full moon illuminated the scene, and I managed to see something moving between the trees. It looked like a deer, but its walk was strange, slow, and clumsy. Its legs bent in an unnatural way, and it came closer and closer to the cabin. It stopped right at the edge of the moonlight, as if waiting for something. Rocky kept growling, and I couldn't take my eyes off that thing that was watching us. Then, it started walking again. My heart began to race when I saw it heading directly for our cabin. Its movement was unsettling. It was as if its body couldn't hold itself up properly. And as it got closer, I noticed something worse. It wasn't a deer, or not entirely. It had the body of a deer, yes, but its legs were too long, and its neck was too thin, twisting from side to side. As it came even closer, I saw that it had no eyes, only empty sockets that seemed to be staring right at me. I stepped back, my heart pounding. Rocky started barking desperately, throwing himself toward the door as if he wanted to protect me from whatever was outside. I covered my ears with my hands, trying to block out the sound of the barking and the thudding of those long legs approaching the cabin. For a moment, everything went silent. I could only hear my breathing and the beating of my heart. But the silence didn't last long. I began to hear something scratching the wooden porch, slowly, as if testing the strength of the door. The cabin door started to open slowly, as if someone on the other side was gently pushing it. I ran to the wardrobe in my room and locked myself inside, covering my ears so I wouldn't hear the sounds outside. A few minutes passed that felt like hours. Suddenly, in the darkness of the wardrobe, I heard those footsteps entering the cabin, dragging across the wooden floor. Something inside me told me not to move, not to let that thing know I was there. Then, I heard a horrible sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor, and then a deep snort, as if it were sniffing the air, searching for me. The footsteps came closer and closer until they stopped right outside the wardrobe. I peeked through a crack in the door and saw it, standing on those strange 4 legs, looking directly at the wardrobe. I closed my eyes tightly for a moment, and when I opened them again, that thing was gone. When I told my parents what I had seen, they said it was a nightmare, that maybe Rocky had seen a deer, and that it had all been my imagination. I wanted to believe them, wanted to think it had all been a dream. But in the morning I saw something that made me doubt. On the wooden porch there were deep scratches, as if something with sharp claws had scraped it. I never went back to the cabin, and since then, I've always avoided the woods. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I'm sure I hear those footsteps I heard as a child, and I feel like something is watching me from the shadows, something that doesn't belong to this world.
Unexpected encounter.
The figure that emerged from the darkness didn't walk like a man. its legs bent in strange ways, and when it turned its head toward me, I knew I was doomed. A few months ago, my cousin and I decided to go camping in a remote area of New Mexico. He was passionate about the paranormal, and the place was full of strange stories, from sightings of lights in the sky to tales of people vanishing in the desert. I didn't believe much in those things, but I thought it would be fun to get away from civilization for a few days and enjoy the peace. We arrived at the site at sunset, set up our tent, and lit a campfire. As we talked, my cousin started telling me about skinwalkers, witches capable of transforming into animals, cursed beings who can imitate human voices and always bring bad luck. I laughed and told him to stop scaring me with stories, but he insisted that they deserved respect. Hours later, already well into the night, my cousin fell asleep, but I couldn't. I felt uneasy, like something in the air wasn't right. I put on my headphones to distract myself with music and lay down, facing the entrance of the tent. Suddenly, I saw a shadow pass in front of the campfire, momentarily blocking the light. I shot up, thinking it was a coyote, but I didn't hear any footsteps or growls. I stayed still, trying to listen, but the only sound was my own breathing. I told myself it was just nerves, but then I heard it. A voice. It was barely perceptible at first, a low murmur, like someone was trying to speak from far away. I moved closer to the entrance, straining my ears, and the voice became clearer. "Come here," it said, in a broken tone, like the words didn't come easily. I slowly unzipped the tent and peeked outside. That's when I saw it. A few meters from the campfire, there was a figure. At first, I thought it was a man, but its posture was strange. It was thin and hunched forward, as if its body couldn't stay upright. Its skin was ash gray, dry and cracked like the bark of a tree. And its eyes. I don't know how to describe them, because although they seemed empty, I felt like they were looking straight at me. My instinct was to wake my cousin, but fear held me back. I felt like if I moved, that thing would run at me. The figure then jerked suddenly, as if twisting its body, and its neck twisted to the side, as though it was trying to adjust its head on its shoulders. And in that moment, it began to change. Its bones creaked, and its skin stretched and writhed as it adopted a new form. Its limbs lengthened, its legs bent backward like those of an animal, and its face, already inhuman, transformed into a grotesque mask, half human, half beast. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The terror had paralyzed me. The creature started moving toward the campfire, slowly, as if savoring the fear it was causing. And then, the most terrifying thing happened. It began to imitate me. First, my laughter, then my voice talking to my cousin. But it sounded distorted, like someone was trying to mimic me through a broken radio. I couldn't take it anymore and shoved my cousin awake, whispering that we needed to leave. He didn't understand anything, but when he saw the panic on my face, he peeked out of the tent. The creature had disappeared, but my cousin knew I wasn't joking. Without a word, we grabbed our things and bolted to the car. As we sped away, I swear I heard my own voice screaming from the camp, a cry of anguish that echoed through the night. "You won't escape," murmured that voice, now identical to mine. We never spoke about what happened that night, and I've never returned to that place. But sometimes, when I'm alone in my room and everything is quiet, I hear something outside, something that mimics my laughter, my voice, as if that thing is still looking for me. Thank you for journeying with us through the dark passages of these stories. If you enjoyed them, give us a like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss more tales of terror. Until next time, where fear will once again be your companion.